Not every car is designed to be interesting. In fact, most aren't. The purpose of a car, after all, is to transport humans from one place to another. Regardless, there are many seemingly unremarkable vehicles throughout history that are hiding surprising secrets. And while I can't even begin to cover every such vehicle, this video features some that I find particularly memorable for whatever reason. Not really sure why. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new, but honestly, this was just an excuse for me to get incredibly nerdy about cars. Just before the very financially stable Korean automaker Daewoo was bought by General Motors in 2002, it developed the Big Magnus, a replacement for the earlier Leganza. Now, they knew that they needed a new engine for the Magnus, since the old GM 4-cylinder was widely panned in the previous car. So, they decided to hire Porsche, yes, that Porsche, to help with the engine design. This was going to be a mainstream front-wheel drive sedan, so you'd think that they'd probably put a 2-point-something liter inline-4 in it, or maybe even a larger 60-degree V6 as an option or something like that. Nope! Instead, Daewoo somehow fit a transverse inline-6 in this thing. Why? I'm not entirely sure, but since Porsche was involved, they probably knew what they were doing. Obviously, it couldn't be a particularly large inline-6, and the 2.5-liter unit was massively under square, with a 77mm bore and an 89.2mm stroke. It had 4 valves per cylinder and dual overhead cams. But just because Porsche was involved didn't mean it was a performance machine. It cranked out 155 horsepower at 5,800 RPM and 177 pound-feet of torque at a fairly high 4,000 RPM. That manages to be 2 fewer horsepower than the base 4-cylinder Toyota Camry of the time, and 20 fewer than the dangerously fast base Nissan Altima. Combined with a 3,400 pound curb weight and a mandatory ZF 4-speed automatic, the sedan took over 10 seconds to leisurely stroll to 60 miles per hour. What the engine excelled at, as with most inline-6s, was smoothness. When it reached the United States in 2004 as the Suzuki Verona, the motoring press lauded its interior quality, standard features, and refinement for the money. A highly spec'd Verona with real heated leather seats, definitely not real wood trim, a sunroof, and automatic climate control could be had for a price comparable to a basic Toyota Camry LE. Further, it had a surprisingly supple ride with minimal wind and road noise. It was also styled by Intel Design, the same firm responsible for the DeLorean, Lotus Esprit, and Maserati MC12. And no, I'm not joking about that. Unfortunately for General Motors, the Verona was never particularly successful in the United States, leaving the market after just 3 model years. But that probably didn't bother them too much, because they tried to sell this car in almost every conceivable market under way too many brand names. According to the ever-reliable source Wikipedia, the Magnus was also sold as the Chevrolet Epica, Chevrolet Avanda, Daewoo Avanda, and the Formosa Magnus, which was apparently the Taiwanese version. And it doesn't stop there, because the sadly non-Ital design styled next-gen version was also sold under these names. It's also worth noting that there have been other mass-produced transverse inline-6 cars, most notably 6-cylinder front-wheel drive-based Volvos. Practically bankrupt British Motor Corporation also tried to do this in the 60s with the ADO-17 Landcrab cars, with a transversely mounted 2.2-liter E-Series inline-6 powering the front wheels. This configuration lived on in a couple versions of the wedge-shaped Princess, before being dropped with the launch of the oft-forgotten Austin Ambassador. In a similar vein of questionable engine configurations, there's the Renault 21. This car looks, and largely is, a fairly standard 1980s European family car. However, it is French, so, you know, they couldn't make it too boring, apparently. If you take a look at a lower-end 1.7-liter 4-cylinder model, you might notice that the engine, as expected in a front-wheel drive car, is transversely mounted. However, they wanted a more powerful 2-liter version of the car, but Renault apparently didn't have a transverse transmission strong enough for it. So, you might be asking, how did they solve this predicament? Did they develop a stronger transmission? Did they detune the engine a little bit so the transmission wouldn't blow up? Did they just decide not to offer more powerful engines and lead customers to the more upmarket Renault 25? No. Renault decided that the only natural solution to this problem was to completely re-engineer the front of the car, flip the engine around, and stick an existing transmission to the end of it. In fact, the larger engined cars had different wheelbases, hoods, and front fenders to the smaller engined versions of the same car. Needless to say, the company accountants must have been at a cafe when that decision was made. Unlike most French cars, they actually sold these in America as the Renault and later Eagle medallion. The Eagle brand is honestly a story in itself, but at least they figured out that it wouldn't make sense to offer the transverse engined versions in the US market. Longitudinal front-wheel drive cars are very uncommon today, but there are many instances of this layout in the past. It was most famously used by Saab, Subaru, and Audi, but can be found in cars as diverse as the Honda and Acura Legend and the Oldsmobile Tornado. Offering both transverse and longitudinal configurations in the same car, however, is certainly unusual, but I would expect nothing less from Renault. What do two mid-2000s Japanese minivans and a fairly dull luxury sedan have in common with a Rolls-Royce Phantom and a Bugatti Veyron? Well, apart from being, cars, nothing probably springs to mind. However, they were actually some of the only vehicles to ever use Michelin's revolutionary PAX run-flat tires. Now, for a bit of context, run-flat tires usually make some significant sacrifices in order to provide that extra bit of safety when punctured. Obviously there's cost, but also extra unsprung weight that sacrifices handling and ride comfort. Michelin thought that they could solve the ride quality problem by foregoing reinforced sidewalls. Instead, they created a fancy polymer ring designed to slot into a channel in specific to PAX wheels, then secured the actual tires to the top of the wheel with beads designed to alleviate the effects of pressure loss. Oh, and also the tires only came in metric sizes that kilometer-fearing Americans did not understand. Apparently, these tires weren't the best in terms of tread wear, which quickly revealed another problem. They were incredibly inconvenient to replace. Owners had to get them replaced at specialty facilities rather than their neighborhood tire shop, and had difficulty sourcing new tires once there. Perhaps unsurprisingly, those who had forked out the cash for a top-of-the-line Honda Odyssey, or were expecting a premium experience to accompany their Acura RL purchase, were not particularly happy, and filed a lawsuit. Michelin and Honda ended up settling by reimbursing previous tire maintenance expenditures and putting a 3-year, 36,000-mile tire warranty for wear in place. They were still stuck with those weird tire sizes that only fit PAX tires though, which is why you might have noticed quite a few 3rd-gen Honda Odyssey vans with aftermarket wheels. Shockingly, when Michelin licensed the technology to other tire manufacturers, none of them actually used it. I mean, I just cannot possibly figure out why that was the case. Porsche is no stranger to helping other firms engineer their vehicles. It was probably the main reason why the company continued to exist after persistently flirting with bankruptcy. But while most car enthusiasts probably think of legendary performance cars like the Audi RS2 and Mercedes-Benz 500e when discussing Porsche collaborations, they also had a hand in some less interesting automobiles. Take, for example, the Peugeot 607. It's a slightly melted-looking large French executive sedan produced between 1999 and 2010, and apart from being used as an official French government vehicle, there's not much to say about it. However, it used a 4-speed Tiptronic automatic transmission co-developed between ZF and, you guessed it, Porsche. Okay, I will admit that the Tiptronic is one of the least exciting transmissions put in Porsche cars. And I'm guessing that all 2 driving enthusiast Peugeot 607 customers would have chosen the 5-speed manual option instead. But, considering that the most powerful version of this executive barge featured a 2.7-liter V6 with an earth-shattering 204 horsepower, I doubt anyone unleashed the sporty roots of the Porsche Tiptronic by putting it into manual mode. Oh, and also it's worth noting that the 4-speed Tiptronic was already sloppy seconds by 1999, as Porsche had switched to a 5-speed for their own cars. And the more you learn about this car, the more that makes sense. It reportedly rode on a platform shared with the decade-old Citroën XM, and existed in a segment that was persistently falling in popularity. But apparently it was successful enough to keep in production for 10 years, so what do I know? When Subaru launched its first mid-sized crossover, the B9 Tribeca, around 2006, the public wasn't in love with its distinctive front end. But luckily for Subaru, they already had nearly all the body panels they needed for a quick emergency refresh at their disposal. That's because the B9 Tribeca was supposed to launch alongside the Saab 96X platform mate. But wait, you may be asking, why the heck was Saab working together with Subaru on a family SUV? It all comes back to our good old friend, General Motors. You see, GM took over a struggling Saab in the 1990s, slowly erasing the brand's personality and setting it up for its depressing demise in the early 2010s. They also, because of course they did, had a stake in Subaru in the early 2000s. This resulted in the creation of the quote-unquote Subaru, or what is officially the 92X. While the Impreza-based wagon saw the light of day, the 96X SUV was cancelled when GM sold its stake in Subaru, even though the project was nearing completion, judging by this prototype looked at least. But, in the end, because of the 96X's sacrifice, Subaru managed to turn its crossover from a distinctive but slightly repulsive family hauler to an amorphous blob with precisely 0 personality. A remarkable achievement, indeed. So, there you have it. There are likely hundreds of cars that could fit the premise of this video, but neither of us have got all day. I know this is a little different from my usual content, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Maybe you even learned some new useless car information. I might even do another one of these in the future if this video does well, so stay tuned and consider subscribing if you somehow like my content. Have a wonderful day, and, I don't know, bore every single one of your friends by telling them extensive details about the Daewoo Magnus. Bye!